Your doctor probably told you it's just age. Mine did too, more than once, with the same small shrug he gives when he's out of easy answers. I'm here to tell you that's not actually true, and I don't mean that as some feel-good slogan. I mean it as a fact you can test against your own life. Age doesn't explain why one 70-year-old gets up once a night and another gets up 5 times, eating from the exact same calendar, carrying the exact same number of birthdays. If age alone were the cause, the math would even out across men. It doesn't. Something else is doing the work, and it's not one vague, getting older. It's specific, nameable, and in most cases, fixable. I'm 83, and these days I sleep through most nights without ever fully waking. When I do get up, it's once, it's fast, and I'm back under the covers within a minute. I took a weekend trip to my daughter's place last month and didn't think twice about which room had the closest bathroom. I just packed and went, the way I used to before any of this started. I'm not telling you that to boast. I'm telling you because for years I assumed a man my age simply didn't get to have that anymore, and I was wrong about that. Let me walk you through the 5 signs, because I think you'll recognize at least 3 of them in yourself before I finish. The first sign is the one everybody notices first. Waking up more than once or twice a night, night after night, not just on the nights you had a second cup of coffee or a glass of wine with dinner. It happens on the dry nights, too, the boring nights, the nights you did everything right. That consistency is the tell. Age alone doesn't produce a pattern that rigid. A genuinely tired bladder from age would be inconsistent, better some nights, worse others, tracking with how much you drank. When it's the same almost every night, regardless of what you drank, something structural is involved, not just wear and tear. The second sign is the stream itself losing its authority. You stand there, and instead of a strong, direct flow, you get something thinner, slower, sometimes with a delay before anything even starts. Men have described it to me as waiting for the plumbing to catch up with the intention. That hesitation, that weak push, isn't a muscle getting older. Muscles that age slow down gradually, over years, evenly. This kind of change tends to show up as a narrowing, a channel getting physically tighter, which is a very different mechanical problem than simple fatigue. The third sign is standing there afterward with the nagging sense that you're not actually finished, even though nothing more is coming. You walk away, and 10 minutes later you feel the pressure again, like your body never got the memo that the job was done. That's not psychological. That's a bladder that emptied partially, refilling faster than a bladder that emptied completely, which means your next bathroom trip arrives sooner than it should, stacking the whole day's rhythm against you. The fourth sign is urgency that arrives without warning and without mercy. One moment you're fine, and the next moment you need a bathroom immediately, with almost no build-up in between. That sudden, humiliating urgency, the kind that makes men start scouting bathroom locations before they even sit down anywhere new, is a different signal than simple frequency. It's the bladder's alarm system firing off a false emergency, and it tends to travel together with the other 4 signs rather than showing up alone. And the fifth sign, the one almost nobody connects to the others, is daytime frequency creeping upward too. Not just the nights, but the mornings and afternoons, trip after trip, until you've quietly started mapping every bathroom in every place you go without even realizing you've built that habit. When all 5 of these show up together, or even 3 of them, age stops being a believable explanation on its own. Something specific is happening, and it has a name. Here's what nobody sat me down and explained, and I think that's the real reason so few men ever get ahead of this. The prostate sits wrapped directly around the tube that carries urine out of the body. As it enlarges, which happens to most men to some degree as the decades pass, it can squeeze that channel from the outside, the way a hand tightening around a garden hose chokes off the flow without touching the water itself. That's sign 2, the weak stream explained. But the same swelling that narrows the channel also changes how the bladder behaves. A bladder pushing against a tighter exit doesn't fully empty no matter how long you stand there, which means it starts the next cycle already partway full. That's sign 3, the incomplete feeling, and it's also the engine behind sign 1, because a bladder that starts each cycle partway full refills to the point of urgency far sooner than a bladder that emptied completely. Layer onto that a second thing almost nobody mentions: the bladder wall itself. Irritated and under more pressure than it was built to handle, becomes twitchy, prone to signaling "go now" well before it's actually full. That's sign 4, the sudden urgency, and once you understand it, it stops feeling random. It's a bladder that's been mechanically stressed for months or years, finally protesting. And once the nights are broken and the urgency is unpredictable, the daytime bathroom mapping of sign 5 follows naturally. You start planning your whole life defensively, without ever deciding to. I want to be honest about something else, because I lived it myself for over a decade before I understood any of this. I never once raised it directly with my own doctor. It felt too minor, too embarrassing, competing for time against blood pressure and cholesterol in an appointment that never ran longer than 8 or 9 rushed minutes. So I just adjusted, stopped drinking anything after 6 in the evening, started scouting bathrooms out of habit before I even knew I was doing it, told myself this was simply what getting older felt like. That silence, multiplied across millions of men doing the exact same quiet math, is the real reason this problem hides in plain sight for so long. Nobody explains the mechanism, so nobody questions the assumption, and the assumption just calcifies into, "it's just age," a phrase that lets everyone off the hook, including the actual cause sitting there the whole time, tightening its grip a little more every year. For years, one number ran my life: the PSA. It would tick up a point and I'd lie awake the whole night, certain it meant the worst, picturing the biopsy, the knife, the end of everything. Then someone finally told me the truth no doctor had. That number doesn't measure cancer, it measures your prostate. And as we age, it climbs mostly because the gland is simply enlarging, benign, swollen, and uncomfortable, not the worst. The number was scaring me half to death over something ordinary. And the prescriptions they push to shrink it? They can flatten your drive completely, soften everything, quietly take the man right out of you. I wasn't willing to trade that away. There's a gentle way to support that gland, keep it comfortable, a healthy size, without surrendering any of that. Keep getting checked every year, of course. At 83, that number doesn't own me anymore. I finally have peace. Let me show you what gave it to me in this video. And if you want the simple support I personally use, there's a free presentation linked in the description below. So here's what actually surprised me most when I finally went looking for answers beyond, "it's just age." It wasn't a supplement first, and it wasn't a procedure. It was salt. Specifically, how much of it I was eating without ever noticing, because it isn't sitting in a shaker on my table. It's baked into bread, folded into canned soup, layered into deli meat and frozen dinners, and the healthy granola bar I used to grab without reading the label. Researchers who track men dealing with frequent nighttime bathroom trips have found that daily sodium intake predicts how often they wake up to go. Men who measurably cut back on salt saw their nighttime trips drop, independent of anything else changing in their treatment. I want to be honest about what that means and doesn't mean. It isn't a cure, and it isn't going to shrink anything. But the mechanism makes sense once you hear it, and that's exactly why I bring it up before anything else. Extra sodium doesn't just raise blood pressure, which most of us already knew. It also pulls extra water into your bloodstream to dilute it, and your kidneys respond by producing more urine to get rid of the excess. Urine that has to go somewhere, and for a lot of men, somewhere turns out to be 3 a.m. On top of that, a bladder that's already irritated and under pressure from a narrowed channel becomes more reactive to that extra fluid volume, not less. So the salt doesn't cause the prostate to squeeze the channel. That's a separate mechanism entirely. But it does pour more fluid directly into a system that's already struggling to keep up, which is exactly why cutting it back showed up in the research as fewer trips, not 0 trips, but fewer, and for free. I didn't rip every seasoning out of my kitchen overnight. That's not sustainable, and it's not necessary. I started reading labels and the things I ate most often, the bread, the canned goods, the frozen dinners, because those invisible sources carry far more sodium than anything I'd ever sprinkle on myself at the table. I swapped canned soup for the low-sodium version sitting right next to it on the same shelf. I started using herbs, garlic, a squeeze of lemon, black pepper, instead of reaching for the salt automatically out of habit. Within about 3 weeks, I noticed I was reaching for water less at dinner because I wasn't as thirsty from all that extra sodium pulling at me, and that alone meant less fluid working its way toward my bladder come midnight. But salt alone didn't finish the job, because it addresses the fluid volume, not the two mechanical pieces I described earlier, the narrowing and the incomplete emptying. So I built out the rest of it as a small system, 3 habits working together rather than any single fix carrying the whole weight. The first, double voiding before bed. You urinate normally, wait about 30 seconds, relax completely, and try again. Because the bladder doesn't fully empty on the first pass when the channel is narrowed, that second attempt often catches what got left behind, which means you start the night with less already sitting there refilling toward the next wake-up. The second, elevating my legs for 20 minutes in the late afternoon, a cushion under my calves while I watched the evening news, which let some of the fluid that pools in the lower legs during the day redistribute and get processed by my kidneys while I was still upright, instead of all of it arriving at once the moment I laid down to sleep. The third, cutting caffeine and alcohol in the evening specifically, because both act as bladder irritants and mild diuretics on top of everything else already stacked against a tired system at night. None of these 3 would have done much on their own. Together with the salt reduction, sustained for close to 2 months, they changed the pattern for me, not overnight and not in a straight line, but genuinely. One thing I need to say plainly, if you're on blood pressure medication, a diuretic, or anything for your heart or kidneys, please talk to your own doctor before making any significant change to your sodium intake. Some medications interact with how your body handles salt and fluid, and your doctor knows your specific chart in a way no video ever can. This isn't a reason to avoid the conversation, it's the reason to have it. 2 weekends ago, my grandson wanted help building a treehouse in his backyard. Most of a Saturday spent on my feet, hammer in hand, drinking iced tea in the sun without a single thought about where the nearest bathroom was. Years back, I'd have quietly calculated that whole day before agreeing to go. This time, I just went, worked, laughed, and drove home tired in the good way instead of the broken sleep way. I think about a man named Delmar, 79, who wrote to me after an earlier video. He'd been getting up 4, sometimes 5 times a night for over 6 years and had genuinely accepted it as simply what happens once you pass 75. What actually moved him wasn't a promise of a miracle, it was hearing the 5 signs laid out one at a time and realizing he had all 5, not just the one he'd always complained about. He started reading labels the very next grocery trip, swapped his canned chili and deli turkey for lower sodium versions sitting on the same shelf, and added the leg elevation because he was already sitting in his recliner most evenings anyway. He told me the biggest surprise wasn't how much better he slept, it was how thirsty he used to be at dinner without ever questioning why, and how that thirst quietly disappeared within the first couple of weeks, well before he noticed any change at night. He also admitted, and I recognized this in myself instantly, that part of him had assumed something this ordinary, reading a label, moving a cushion under his legs, couldn't possibly matter as much as a pill. Understanding the actual mechanism, not just being told to drink less, was what finally moved him from skeptical to consistent. If you're on any prescription for your heart, your blood pressure, or your prostate specifically, please hear this clearly one more time. Nothing I've described here replaces your treatment, and you should never stop or adjust a medication on your own. Bring this to your own doctor, the salt, the habits, all of it, every time, no matter how small it sounds, sitting in a video like this one. Here's what I settled on, a few drops a day. And let me tell you why it works. One compound calms one signal, but a swollen prostate answers when several are calmed at once. The growth signal, the inflammation, the pressure inside it. So what I use concentrates them, working as one, the way the research actually uses them, not a single ingredient pretending to be enough. A gland that stays comfortable and a healthy size, fewer trips, and the quiet of no longer fearing that number. It leaves the man fully intact, none of that flattening the prescriptions can do. It's linked right under this video, go look for yourself. It won't replace your doctor or your yearly check. It supports the biology right alongside them. I'm 83, and that number doesn't own me anymore. What I want you to walk away with is this: 5 signs, not 1. If you've been quietly living with 2 or 3 of them, telling yourself it's just the calendar catching up with you, I hope you now see there's a specific mechanism underneath every one of them, and something as ordinary as what's sitting on your kitchen shelf has more to do with your nights than your age ever did. I think about all those years I rearranged my whole life around a bathroom I never questioned. The trips I turned down, the seat I always chose near the aisle, the quiet, constant math I ran before agreeing to anything. There's a particular kind of loneliness in managing something silently for years, convinced it's not worth mentioning to your own doctor, when the actual explanation was sitting in a soup can the whole time. I think about the man I was at 76, mapping bathrooms before I even said yes to a dinner invitation. And I think about the man I am now, who says yes first and thinks about it later, because most days, there's nothing left to think about. That's not luck. That's dignity, quietly rebuilt one ordinary habit at a time. If any of those 5 signs sounded like your own bathroom battle, tell me in the comments which ones you recognized. I read every single one myself, and I mean that. And if this kind of honest, specific explanation is useful to you, go ahead and subscribe. There's more of this every week, and it matters more than you'd think that you're here for.